Before we start this edition of Cast Iron on Machine Head's The Blackening, we would like to take a moment to discuss recent developments in metal that specifically revolve around Machine Head's Robb Flynn and Pantera's Phil Anselmo. At the most recent Dime Bash, a celebration of the life of Dimebag Darrell Abbott, Anselmo decided to bid attendees farewell by giving a Sieg Heil salute and screaming "White Power." This is not the first time Anselmo has been caught being racist in public, but it is the first time he's come under such heavy criticism. His biggest critic was Robb Flynn, who was also performing at the event. Flynn also goes on to say that a conversation backstage resulted in Anselmo saying he hated the nigger era of Machine Head. Obviously, Flynn decries Anselmo's actions and goes on to say that he's used the word in the past and has rightfully been punished for doing it. The reason why we mentioned this before this edition of Cast Iron is because there's a song on The Blackening called Slanderous, where Flynn actually uses this slur and we rightly criticise him for it. However, we also recorded this podcast prior to the events of Dime Bash, so bear in mind Flynn's recent words, where he openly regrets using the term. For the record, Anselmo has now apologised for his actions as well. Thank you for your time, and on with the show.
Hello and welcome to Cast Iron, a podcast all about metal. It is 2016. The nights are very dark in winter, and so appropriately we are listening to Machine Head's The Blackening.
Wow! Looks like a spin in the eye of a dead man's face. I take the wings of a man not yet in his grave.
So Lewis, how are you?
Not bad, fella. Yourself?
I'm pretty good. I'm just back from a run. I'm a bit annoyed that my super duper Apple Watch gadget keeps crashing when I go for runs and it won't tell me my heart rate. So it's the ultimate in first world problems. But as you know, it's traditional for me to go for a run to whatever metal album we're listening to.
I've been pretty much tanning this all week, it's got to be said. Found it cheap on Discogs, and yeah.
So you're brand new to this, aren't you? You're new to the Blackening.
I am. I only previously had Through the Ashes of Empires and Burn My Eyes on CD. So that's basically the extent of my Machine Head knowledge. I have an interest in the band. I think I appreciate them more for how sort of influential they are to sort of modern metal than I, a fan, I suppose. But yeah, it was an interesting listen. It's got to be said.
So I guess we should give a bit of background to Machine Head. So they are, I guess you could call them a groove metal band. Probably call them a groove thrash metal type band.
Yeah. I'm going to say they are definitely now a metalcore band. But
metal. You think they're metalcore? No.
Yeah,
wow.
Very much so. But I think they definitely have roots in thrash. They definitely get a sort of a Bay Area sort of sound to them. And as they progress, they bring in their rather much maligned new metal phase.
Yeah, I know we talked about it before we started the podcast, and it was Supercharger and something else.
And the Burning Red is the other one.
But I dodged those. In fact, they're not even in my iTunes collection. So I deliberately avoided them.
Basically, they do two sort of, straightforward sort of thrash, groove metal albums, Burn My Eyes and The More Things Change. Then there's the Burning Red and Supercharger, and then they sort of return to their roots and get a bit more metalcore-y as Through the Ashes of the Empire in 2003, and then obviously The Blackening in 2007.
So just to clear it up, what would you mean? What do you mean by metalcore?
Their rhythms are very chuggy. Very sort of one-notey, one chordy.
Really?
But I would say
we've been listening to the same band.
Yeah,
because it's not. I've never heard them described as a metalcore band. Generally, they get described as groove metal or thrash metal.
I've got to say, I was listening to I've been listening to The Blackening pretty much non-stop for the last week, and I definitely all the rhythm is very sort of and I'm just like. Yeah, this is metalcore.
But
they flourish it with lovely leads and solos, and they do have very noticeable, riffs that are very melodious. But I think a lot of the core, especially in like the verses and things like that, is that sort of one chord rhythm that sort of permeates a lot of it. But that's just something I've picked up on, really. I think if you were coming into Machine Head fresh, I think you would definitely notice that they were a very accomplished, sort of traditionally sounding metal band.
Yeah, because I do think it is quite traditional, and as you said, there's definitely that Bay Area Metallica thrash sound to it, even to the point where, depending on the release of The Blackening you have, it's got a cover of Battery on it.
Yeah.
And I would see them as a continuation, but also an evolution of that style. But I think there's enough flourish and fun and interesting riffiness in there that I wouldn't want to tarnish them with the
I'm
label
not
of metalcore.
saying that metalcore is a bad genre. I'm just saying that I think they probably lean a little bit more on it now than they perhaps used to. I think Burn My Eyes and The More Things Change are definitely sort of thrashier sounding records, and definitely, like you say, more of a continuation of that Metallica sound. Whereas I think as they've gone through, their new metal phase, they've then taken on modern metal and metalcore as quite a big sort of influence to their sound. Personally, that's how I feel anyway.
Okay, so I guess we should get straight into The Blackening then, because then you can, since you choose the sound clips, you can either make it as representative of what you think is possible or what I think is possible. So the first track in this is Clenching the Fist of Dissent. So I love the build up to this track. I love the way it opens, and it has what I would kind of call a great example of the classic Machine Head guitar tone, which is that they often use a phaser effect.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, typically for the solos in the more melodic section, and then they move into a more sharp and punchy standard riffing style. But I really like the way they have toned up the guitars, and I really like that novel use of phasers, because typically you would hear it kind of warping around a solo. So I like that they've just brought it into the standard thing.
Yep.
I think it's also a really early indication of how good the mix is in this album.
Yeah, it's very clear. You can hear pretty much every instrument really clearly.
Yeah, you've got great bass and drums. Everything's in balance. Lead guitars all sound really good. It's a superbly produced album. So what do you think of this one? Since this is your first impression of returning to Machine Head, what did you think of it?
It's too long.
Okay, so I have actually written, that it is a really long song, and it is a challenging introduction to Machine Head if you're new to the band. I think it's pretty much the album in microcosm, because you've got a thrashy verse, you've got a sludgy or groove metal chorus, and then 6 minutes in, you've got this amazing dueling guitar solo that just comes out of nowhere, and it's one of the best in the album. There's a tapping and noodling, but they kind of keep a lid on the solo and don't let the song totally run away with it. But then about 7 minutes in, when the song probably should end, it shifts again, and then it drops out, and people are singing, and the dynamism's quite good. But at that point you think, wow. And then it even fades out at the end, as if you got this impression that the song would never end, or never did end.
I'm not a big fan of fades on metal songs. It
neither
feels
am
a little bit lazy. I think the thing for me personally is it is definitely a very, very fun, stompy metal track, like really groovy. So yeah, I have a lot of fun with it. But I was noticing an awful lot of, an awful lot of their riffs definitely come down to that sort of one chord chugging. Through a lot of the verses and things like that, and it was a bit like, this is a 10-minute song. I don't know if I want to listen to that for so long. And it spends a lot of time with not so much the solos, but there's definitely lots of different like breakdowns. It feels like the middle eight goes on for like a song. It spends an awful lot of time just sort of messing around, where it could be sort of condensing its ideas into, maybe a 5 or 6 minute song, and being really impactful and punchy, and just, does exactly what it says on the tin and gets to the point a lot quicker. Whereas, that running
it's a slow
time
clench,
is hard
isn't
work.
it? It's a slow clench of the fist of dissent. And I think it's a good song, and I enjoy listening to it the whole way through, but I do think it outstays its welcome by about 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is a recurring theme throughout The Blackening.
Yeah.
That quite a few of the songs are a little bit longer than they need to be. I mean, we'll go on to talk about Halo specifically, but it does have a radio edit, and it's an interesting difference between that and main track. So I like this one. I think the solo is awesome. I think the solo is really, really good, and these guys are also good that at the same time that they've got the Metallica thrashy style, they're also quite good at Maiden-esque dueling guitar solos.
Yeah, I mean, if that's your thing, I think for me personally, it gets a little bit self-indulgent, especially the solos in Halo. Like, those go on for way too long. That's like Slayer levels of stupid back and forth. But
right,
let's go back to the track list for the time being.
Yeah, let's not skip all the way to Halo, because we'll have plenty to say about that. I mean, I think it's a good song, but it's a bit too long. And if you were like, I should definitely listen to The Blackening, you could see people. I wouldn't blame anybody for going, oh my god, after the first song.
Yeah. But thankfully, the second song is Beautiful Morning, which is a lot more sort of, I don't know, just condensed. Like, it's a better showcase of what they're about and how well they can do, how well they can songwrite. Because I really enjoy this. There's loads and loads of really great riffs, and it just doesn't outstay its welcome, which is a really positive thing for me.
I kind of imagine, and this is probably the podcast in which we will get an explicit tag on iTunes, because after the end of the first track, Robb Flynn's got a message for you, and it is, "Fuck you all!" Which is such a good way to open any track. It's but I think it just starts off really brutal and thrashy, and I think that because the first track is so long, you need something really hard and driving to get you back into it a bit.
Yeah. I think in an ideal world they would have started with an absolute banger, because that always gets your attention, doesn't it? But I think because this is only an 8-track album, you were always going to have long songs, because otherwise it would have felt like an EP. But personally, it's just one of those things. I think especially from A Beautiful Morning onwards, I think it becomes very apparent that I really enjoy just Machine Head getting to the point and having a lot of fun and just being a heavy band, because this is very heavy as well. We haven't spoken a lot about Robb Flynn's vocal style, because while the man can sing,
he can, but he often chooses not to.
Yeah, he's a pretty intense screamer, it's got to be said, and he's got a great scream on him. To be honest with you, it really does permeate the sound.
He sounds like kind of like an angry guy at the pub.
Yeah, you get a lot of those moments where he's sort of like you can sort of hear him seething. He sort of like says it through clenched teeth. It's really good. Like,
but there's a couple of songs in this where he does clean vocals, and I think they're really quite good. There's a little bit on Beautiful Morning. It's more apparent on Now I Lay Thee Down and Halo.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think this is a good wake up after clenching the fist.
Yeah, totally. And I really enjoy it. It's definitely one of my favourite songs of the album.
So definitely one of the really interesting tracks in the album is Aesthetics of Hate.
For the love of brother, I will say these fucking words. Aesthetics of hate, I hope you burn in hell.
Probably the one that this album's most well known for, to be honest with you.
I would think so, yeah. So, give you a bit of background to this. This song, the title "Aesthetics of Hate" comes from an essay that was written following the murder of Dimebag Darrell Abbott, who was the main guitarist in Pantera, and then he went down to do a band called Damage Plan that basically sound exactly like Pantera. And Dimebag was murdered at a Damage Plan gig. I think a guy jumped on stage and shot him in the head a few times. So after that murder, this guy called William Grimm, who was writing for a conservative magazine called Iconoclast. He wrote this piece called "Aesthetics of Hate: R.I.P. Dimebag Abbott and Good Riddance."
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, you can kind of tell where his stance is on this.
yeah, you can tell what his stance is, but I have I read the piece in preparation for this, and I thought I'd read you an excerpt of it because that's probably enough.
Yeah.
It talks about it was highly amusing and also terribly sad to watch on television fans conducting a vigil for the slain Mr. Abbott outside of the Alrosa Villa. It was an assemblage of ignorant, semi-human barbarians who were filthy in attire and manner, intellectually incoherent, and above all else, hideously ugly to the point of physical deformity. Here is a definite case in which the outer appearance of these fans accurately represented the hideousness of their souls. That the physical deformity of their ugliness was self-inflicted makes the spiritual tragedy of their misspent lives all the more tragic. But one can see why the heavy metal fans so closely identified with Mr. Abbott. He was an ignorant, barbaric, untalented possessor of a guitar and large amplifier system. Freakish in appearance, more simian than human, he was the performer of a type of entertainment that can be likened only to a gorilla on PCP. Lacking subtlety, wit, style, emotional range, and anything approaching even the smallest iota of intellectual or musical interest, Mr. Abbott was part of a generation that has confused sputum with art and involuntary reflex actions with emotion.
God almighty. It is pure troll bait. It is
and then he
so
goes on to
bad.
talk about that he actually goes on to say, that matters of taste are not a subject for argument, and then he talks about it, Haydn versus Beethoven. He says they're obviously they're much better than Dimebag Darrell, and then he talks about how children haven't obeyed the 10 Commandments. It's like, if you wanted to write a piece like of greater ignorance about heavy metal in that culture, I think it would be difficult to do that willfully. Like it's a masterclass in how not to write about music or culture.
I love how as well it's like it's basically someone who has been told about heavy metal from someone and is writing a piece on it. It's all the stereotypes you could possibly like sling at someone, and it's just rubbish, hideous, lazy. I don't want to say journalism, but writing.
Yeah, it's a bit like whenever the Brass Eye special on paedophilia came on TV, and lots of politicians lined up to condemn it, and most of them admitted they hadn't actually seen the TV show they were criticising. But anyway, back to the point. After reading this article, Robb Flynn from Machine Head, who was good friends with Darrell Abbott, was not best pleased, and he wrote the song to send a message to Grim implying "fuck you."
Yeah.
And he wrote a post on Machine Head's message board, and it said, what would you know about love or values? What would you know about giving to the world? All that you know is teaching prejudice, and your heart is as black as the ignorant, filthy, and hideously ugly heavy metal fans you try and paint in your twisted, fictitious ramblings. It's because of people like you that there are Nathan Gales in this world. Presumably he's the guy that killed Dimebag.
Right.
Not the Dimebags and metal musicians who work to unite people through music. So that's what Aesthetics of Hate is about, and given the subject matter, it's quite appropriate that it starts off really thrashy and full of rage.
Yeah, it's a damn angry song, it's got to be said, and it's brilliant, really. I mean, if you're gonna use something for an as an influence to an angry song, then that piece of writing is definitely certainly the thing you want. But yeah, Aesthetics of Hate, I absolutely adore this song. It is full of the catchiest Machine Head riffs that you could possibly want, and the chorus is, despite being completely screamed, incredibly memorable.
I hope you fucking burn.
It's just a really, really solid, really good metal song, and it's. If you want something angry to jump around to, it's possibly like one of the best examples of it.
They got a Grammy nomination for the best metal performance for this, and I think that even though it's good to begin with, I think about midway through it becomes something really remarkable, and the dueling solos in this are absolutely incredible. It's easily among the best guitar solos I've ever heard. It really takes your breath away every time. It's a really excellent song.
Yeah. It's a good. It's a really good example of just how brilliant all the musicians in Machine Head are.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think they're quite an underrated band.
I think it's because they sort of, we should probably talk about new wave of American heavy metal, because that was sort of a movement that sort of happened in the early 2000s and sort of lasted up until the mid 2000s, and it sort of encapsulates bands like Trivium, All That Remains, God Forbid, Killswitch, Avenged Sevenfold, and Machine Head are pretty influential to that like movement in particular. I think a lot of those bands cite Machine Head as massive influences, and I think unfortunately by this point, with the Blackening and Through the Ashes of Empire, they were kind of competing against them and not being the influencer anymore. So I think they do just sort of get lost in that scene in a bit of an unfortunate way. But yeah, like we've said, amazing musicians, and Aesthetics of Hate is an absolutely brilliant example of how fantastic they can be.
Good. Glad we like that one. So then after that, we get to calm down a bit and we listen to Now I Lay Thee Down. And this is a slower paced track, and again you've got that really nice phased guitar creeping in.
Yep.
See, again, I think this is a really good groove metal riff that comes in. It's a slow headbanger kind of one.
Yeah. I think the slower pace means it's not like as exciting. I think it's a strange one. I think this one feels like a skipper for me. It's not particularly a bad song by any means. It's a good song. But I think because you've just come off the back of two absolute belters, to have like this sort of a slower pace, like just sort of there's a good groove to it, but it's like you're just sort of nodding along and not headbanging along. So
yeah, I think that's fair. I mean,
yeah.
Actually, whenever I went to revisit The Blackening as part of this podcast, it had stuck in my memory as one of my favourite ones. But it has actually gone down a little bit in my estimation. I still think it's a good track. I think the chorus is really good, and I really like the middle section in this. Again, they're very good at doing the kind of middle sections, the kind of solos that I like, and I really like the solo in this, and I think it fits really well.
Yeah, I can see that.
And they've just kind of churned out great solo after great solo in this album, and they all seem so appropriate, and they don't really outstay their welcome. But I think I like things slightly on the edge of going too far. I mean, I really like it. I don't think it's the best track on the album by any means, but I think it's a reasonable change of pace.
Yeah, I think especially at this is essentially the middle of the record now. You've had three proper full-on metal songs, and to have had to have a break, I think is probably a good idea. I think it's just tarnished a little bit because I'm not too keen on the flow at this point, because we've had that very long song, then two fast absolute bangers, and now we're having another slow one again. It's just I think it's the pacing for me is kind of spoiling it a little bit.
They do a similar thing in the two albums that follow, which are Onto the Locust is the next one, and the track Locust is quite a slow one. They also do it in their latest album, Bloodstone and Diamonds, with a song called Ghost Will Haunt My Bones that I really, really like. But again, it's a slightly slower one. I mean, we'll talk about their later albums after this, but I think it's an okay change of pace, but I'm a fan of this one. Not my favourite, but wouldn't skip it.
I think it's all right. Like it's I'm not against it by any means, but as
I am actively against this song.
But yeah, no, it's there's some good groove to it, but it's I think the change of pace is kind of, I don't know, bringing me down a little bit.
Okay, well, let us try and bring you back up, because the next track on the album is Slanderous.
Right, this has the worst lyrics. This has the worst lyrics. So if you want an example, basically what Robb Flynn is trying to do in this is that he's trying to say that when he comes under criticism or people insult him, that it basically fuels him and he turns it into a positive, and whatever name you can throw at him, he's just gonna ignore you and get on with his life, sort of thing. But unfortunately, what he does is he actually uses an awful lot of slurs that probably have been aimed at him or whatever at some point. But
some of them definitely haven't.
No, and these are the ones I want to come to. So there's a verse here: "I'm a redneck and faggot. the arsehole ignoramus, a wetback and a nigger, and I raise my middle fingers so those that murder us silence us. It's... I can see what he's trying to do, and I can see that he's not trying to be offensive, but I just don't think he should be using these words.
I think I get the point. I mean, I think it's like
They Don't Care About Us by Michael Jackson. That song uses Jewish slurs.
They kick me, kike me, don't you black and white me?
And again, nobody in that position should be using that sort of terminology, but he's not using them in an offensive way. He's using them to sort of decry them. And it's a bit of a...
It's trying to be a rallying cry.
Yeah.
It's trying to be a rallying cry for people who, have been cast aside by society, because he says, I'm a meth head, an alky, dumb cunt, been called a junkie, a retard, and a pussy. I embrace the names you call me, but calling somebody a retard and a pussy is very different to a racial slur. Yeah. And I think that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean... I'm not a big fan of using retard as well as a term.
No, but
something.
He's not either, based on the content of the song.
Yeah,
he's not.
But it's just one of those things that I was listening to it and I'm hearing the words and I'm like, I'm sure he's not meant to be being offensive, but it does upset me a little bit.
But having said that, it's a shame because it's one of the best riffs in the album.
Yeah, it really is. Like musically, it's super fun, and like I think. This is my favourite solo on the record, actually, on Slanderous as well. There's a really damn good solo.
I think it's my favourite riff on the album. I just think it's an absolute barnstormer.
Yeah.
It's easily one of my favourite metal riffs ever, and it is. It's a real shame about the lyrics.
That is what I come away with this song. It's like it's a really damn good song, but it's unfortunately tarnished by some pretty naff lyricism on Robb Flynn's part. Unfortunately,
I think naff is fair. I wouldn't say it's offensive. I think it's just unfortunate.
Yeah. He's not trying to be offensive.
Before.
So
yeah. Well, he's definitely not endorsing those things.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what album we were in before. We had the
sixth. We had it. They were.
Yes. Yeah.
It's one of those things, isn't it? I think it's a shame as well because when you were reading that forum post that he left, that's very well articulated. And very clever. And when you read the lyrics of things like Slanderous, it's like, well, hang on, how has that come from the same person? That doesn't seem strange. This is just as little. This is not as well thought out. It's like he has the right idea, but his delivery isn't particularly well versed. Whereas,
I mean, honestly, their lyrics are never good. It's definitely the weak spot of Machine Head, and indeed most metal bands that are otherwise excellent. Like lyrics always kind of suck. I don't think they have to. I mean, there's very few people I would consider to be really good metal lyricists, apart from, I don't know, I always say Anders Frieden from In Flames, because he basically writes poems. He's very good. But unfortunate. Because it's a really fun track.
Yeah, oh, totally.
Luckily, he is kind of screaming and slurring, so when he says, I love you, it sounds like, so it's not super clear. And personally, for me, I don't find it that annoying. It's only when I went and looked up all the lyrics, I was like, oh dear.
Yeah, it's one of those things, because like, up until this point, they weren't really sort of in the forefront of my mind. But when I was listening to this song, I can hear the slurs and I can hear the terms, and it's like, this is the first time I've been aware of your lyricism, and it's not good, which is not something you particularly want.
It tends to happen with metal, at least I find it. Once you look up the song lyrics, you can't unhear them. And they make sense. But up until that point, you can be blissfully ignorant for a long time.
Yeah.
Especially with screamier stuff, with death metal.
Definitely.
So perhaps if you're listening to this album for the first time, just don't look up the lyrics. just plow through and go, Slanderous. Yeah.
Well, they already know them now. We've just read loads out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well. Spoiler warning.
Listen to the music is the good.
Listen to the music, because the music's really, really good. The first 20-30 seconds of the song anyone can enjoy.
Absolute mosh anthem. That one.
So, shall I move on to Halo then?
We should.
Okay, so again, this opens with nothing but a stonking bass riff and these sitar-esque jangly guitar lines, and it gradually builds in intensity, builds up and up and up, and then it just explodes into this totally awesome heavy metal riff. And it's like really sludgy and groovy and fat and beefy. It's awesome. Yeah, it's really good.
I'd say this is the best chorus on any song on the entire record.
I think this is where you get a good example of how melodic and musical and how good their singing can actually be.
He gets to almost like a falsetto at some point in this song as well, and it's like, wow, you're a really impressive vocalist, and you're not doing yourself justice.
So, I mean, this is it. Like, Robb Flynn is not a bad singer. He just chooses to be bad quite a lot of the time. The chorus is amazing, and it's another really good riff, because you've got the riff for the verses, and it's really good. And then it changes into another really, really good riff for the chorus.
Yeah, what I like about the riff in the chorus in particular as well is they're actually both guitarists are sort of they're almost doing lead work together.
Yes.
So there's not really sort of like a rhythm guitar in the chorus in particular, and it's really quite striking actually. There's nothing really like it on the rest of the album. I mean, the solos come into a similar sort of vein, but to actually have that sort of musicality in the chorus is really quite interesting actually.
Yeah, it's really nice, and you could see somebody putting that in as a solo, and they just sort of flick it in as a chorus line. So you're not a big fan of the middle section, or I guess you maybe want to call it the last third, because it does take about 6 minutes to actually get to the end bit.
I've written in particular in my notes here that I too much time is spent on the solos. I think they go overkill in their dueling in this one, which is a bit of a shame, because then, like we said before, they're fantastic musicians. Like, they can solo till the cows come home, but I think they have soloed until the cows come home on this song in particular. And I also find I got to this point in the record, and I'm like, Machine Head's writing style seems to be a little bit slapdash. I think they write lots and lots of riffs and just sort of stitch them together and not really write a cohesive song. There's lots of like passages, especially in the end of this song, where they just keep adding riffs, and it's like, all right, lads, you're obviously very adept musicians, but we really don't need another refrain or another bridge or another middle eight that just goes on for this long. It seems a bit. They're making it long for the sake of it being long.
I think, so the way I feel about it is, it's really, really good. You get to the solos. They're totally awesome and totally perfect. And I love that you're like, how are they going to finish this off? And you can obviously cut this over with the original song, so I'm not just saying doodly-doo into the microphone. But it's the bit when it goes... And I'm like, oh, that's just perfect. That fits so well. And then after they've played the chorus riff again, then it cuts out. And then he starts doing falsetto, and it's like... why is this here? And then it comes back in with the chorus again, but it's a bit slower, and they've got a different riff over it. And then it drops out again, and then there's this like kind of drum roll bit with more bits.
This is what I'm saying.
And then it goes back into the main riff again, and then I'm like, oh, I really like Halo. But I feel like we could have done with everything after it should have just go at the end.
I can hear it.
So 6 or 7 minutes, and that would have done me.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so what's really interesting is, or at least I think it's really interesting, is that there is a radio edit of Halo, and it is 5 minutes long, and it gets rid of all the bits that I like.
Oh, really?
So,
that's interesting.
So for the radio edit, it cuts out pretty much the entire build-up bit. So the first 2 minutes are gone. Goes into the main bit, and it goes verse, chorus, cuts the entire solo section,
Yep.
goes into the falsetto and then kind of wraps it up a bit with the drum roll and the end bit, and that is pretty much so it cuts out what I think is perhaps the best bit of the song, but it leaves in all the end bits that are the not interesting ones. And if you listen to the radio edit, it just sounds like a generic metal song. You wouldn't understand what I think makes Machine Head so good.
That's a real shame.
Which is that dynamic build up and that really excellent solo at the end, and it's so strange. It's like I think it's really interesting from a creative decision point of view, but I think it's totally the wrong creative decision.
I think it's not a creative decision. I think what happens with radio edits in particular is they choose everything where the vocals are to highlight, because I've definitely heard in, where at some point in my life that radio specifically favours songs with almost non-stop vocals. I think if you listen to a song on the radio, there is always someone singing at any given point, in the bridge, in the chorus, whatever. You don't really have instrumental breakdowns on the radio. I think people lose interest. So radio edits are made specifically to highlight vocals, which is a shame, because Halo...
It's unfortunate for Machine Head.
Yeah, exactly. Halo is not a song made of vocals. There's a very good ebb and flow and some amazing instrumentals and solos that are so important to that song. So yeah, that's a real shame. I'll have to listen to it, because that sounds a bit like they've ruined
I would absolutely say ruined. And I think the take-home message for the listeners is that if you have only listened to the radio edit of Halo and didn't like Machine Head, for God's sake, go back and listen to it properly.
Definitely.
But I think this could, I think it's a really outstanding metal song, but it's just a wee bit too long.
Yeah,
and that's so unfortunate.
It's the same again with Clenching the Fist of Dissent, and there's a lot of songs on this album where I feel like, again, really good metal songs to just go on too long, far too long.
But if you cut that to 7 minutes, that for me would be the best track in the album.
Yeah, I could see that totally, and it's the most dynamic. We
should do an Alan edit, because I'm sure I could figure out which note it is in my guitar I need to play.
Excellent.
But that's the way it was meant to be played. So after that, we go on to Wolves, or as Robb Flynn likes to pronounce it, Whoa! I think this is probably my least favourite track on the album. I think there's nothing wrong with it, but it just kind of sounds like more of the same.
Yeah, I'm in a similar... I think it loses its way around sort of 4.5 minute mark. There's a very clear riff where it's like, oh yeah, this is winding down, and it's like, no, it's going to go on for another 4 minutes, and it's just like,
God, it is 9 minutes long. Good grief.
Yeah, it's there's a really sort of overly long breakdown section where there's I don't think, if there is a solo, it doesn't really sort of make its mark on this song. It spends the last almost half of the song sort of like with these breakdowns and really sort of, and it's like, all right, we get it. You want people to mosh, but like,
like this album's really long. They're gonna have plenty of time to mosh.
Exactly. No, it's a shame really, because it's not. There's nothing particularly wrong with it. It's just.
It's fine. It's just, like I say, it's just not particularly memorable. And actually, whenever we went to record this, I was like, oh God, I don't know, I can't remember Wolves or Farewell to Arms at all. And it's because I've stopped listening to the album after Wolves.
Yeah, it definitely gets that way, doesn't it? I definitely felt this was a sort of overly long song, and it probably could have wrapped itself up halfway through.
It's the kind of song where if you heard it live, you'd be like, oh okay, and then you would get bored in the middle of the song live.
Yeah, it's like, it's not even their best riffs either. It feels like, this is, all right, we need to get another song in here, lads. Anybody got a riff?
B-side grade? Maybe that's a harsh but fair way of describing it.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair.
So what do you think of A Farewell to Arms, which is the last track on the album?
Always our souls entwine. Erase vast divide.
again, I hate repeating myself, but it's just a really long, drawn-out sort of conclusion to the record, and it doesn't really grab me in any way. I don't think there wasn't any particular melodies or riffs that really sort of stood out at me. I think I could feel they were winding down. They needed it to be that sort of, epic, grandiose closer that so many albums sort of favour, instead of just rock out, man. You're a metal band, rock out.
I like it more than you do.
Fair
I think
enough.
it's quite similar to Clenching the Fist of Dissent and Halo in that it is too long. But I think it's quite a good ending to the album. Once it gets going, which does take about 2 or 3 minutes, I think the chorus is really strong.
Okay.
I think it's probably the next best chorus after Halo. And I think it works pretty well. I think the solos are good, but not the best. But it is 10 minutes long.
Yeah, that is the problem. I think I just lost interest by this point. It's like I have listened to this album about 4 times now, and it's like I don't remember Farewell to Arms. It was so long. Oh, such a shame. Such a shame.
Well, I listened to that song about 10 minutes before we started recording this podcast. I don't remember Farewell to Arms.
There we go. See, look, I'm not alone in my
yeah.
opinion here.
No, I don't know. I wouldn't turn off the album until it was over, but I wouldn't necessarily remember that I've been listening to it for the past 10 minutes.
It's a strange one, this album. It feels almost like we're listening to The Poison a little bit, because it's like it shows all this promise. There's all these really good riffs, but not like really good songs. It's a bit of a strange record. I mean, there are some really good songs on this one, don't get me wrong.
I still feel bad for The Poison. That was when I stopped enjoying this podcast. I was like, oh yeah, The Poison's one of my favourite albums. I listened to it and I was like, it's not good.
See, this is the thing. I was expecting The Blackening, because you hear people talk about Machine Head and they say The Blackening is their defining record. Like, that's their magnum opus.
It's generally seen as one of the best metal albums ever.
Yeah, and it's like
Roadrunner Records said it was their album of the century.
Bloody
album of the decade from Metal Hammer.
Christ.
And they won the best album at the Metal Hammer Golden Gods Awards over.
Oh God, what was
Lamb
going on
of God.
that year that this won over?
Well, they got beaten to the Grammys by Slayer, and I think it was a song off Christ Illusion, which I'm not familiar with.
I really like Christ Illusion, but that's for
okay.
that's a conversation for another time. But yeah, anyway, like let's talk about this as a whole then. How do you feel about The Blackening as an album?
I think it's close to a masterpiece.
Really?
Yep, I think it's a really awesome album, but it's kind of like Death by a Thousand Cuts. I think I really like it. Whenever I chose this, I wasn't sure whether to pick this or Locust because it's really good, and I think their latest album, Bloodstone and Diamonds, is really, really good as well. It was one of my favourite albums of 2014. I think taken as a whole, it's very strong, but it's not quite all-time classic.
I just think it's good. I think it's like there's lots of really good riffs and really good ideas here. There's obviously a very very high caliber of musicianship within this band, and they put some fantastic melodies and solos and riffs out there. But I just feel like it's a little bit haphazard in the way it's structured. It doesn't feel like it flows very well. Lots of the songs are too long, and it feels like they just want to rock out and be a heavy band, and it's like, all right, you can do that, but do it in half the time.
To me, it's like they're on the cusp of going between a thrash band and trying to become more progressive and intelligent, and that's where something like Slanderous sums up the album quite well, and it's trying to be something more than they can really back up, whether that's through their song composition or their lyrics.
Yeah, I think the lyrics really let that one down personally, but yeah, it's like it's a solid record, don't get me wrong, and Machine Head are clearly a very, very good metal band, but I just don't think this is structured particularly the best that I would have hoped for, to be honest with you.
I mean, I still think it's really good. I think most of the tracks in this album are really good. Perhaps the last two aren't as good as the other ones, but if you're going to go by the bullet scale, where a 5 out of 10 is a Poison in terms of overall album quality, that's that's a good 75% chunk of this album. This extremely long album is very good.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think I might say 60% of it is pretty damn good, and the others a bit sort of forgettable. Well, maybe not forgettable, but just drawn out. But yeah, that's just my opinion at the end of the day. It's clearly a very well and accomplished sounding record, but it's just pacing really problems for me. It's just a bit of bit all over the shop.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what confuses me is that I think I like it a bit more than you do, but even I wouldn't say, like I said, it's close to a masterpiece.
Yeah.
What I mean is every one of the songs has certain flaws that makes it not that way, but it's interesting that it has been so critically acclaimed in the mainstream, which you don't normally get for a lot of metal albums.
Yeah,
so
I
wonder why it is so well revered, because perhaps two more intelligent critics than us could maybe we're just too intelligent and we just don't appreciate the nuance of the lyrics to slander us.
Come on, rein the ego in a little bit, Alan. Come on. I would like to do some further reading on The Blackening and find out why people feel it's such a classic, because while I definitely think it's a great, or a good record, maybe not great, but I don't know. It doesn't completely grab me, and I feel it's very metalcore as well. There's a lot of chuggy, which is just you can clearly do better than that, lads, because like your solos are amazing and some of your melodies are fantastic. So yeah, that's me personally, anyway.
All right, well, okay, so so what would you recommend people listen to after this, or perhaps instead of this? First of all, me to guess each other's favorite tracks. I think your favorite track is "Aesthetics of Hate."
Yep, it is.
Yay! Okay, what do you think my favorite track is?
Halo.
Oh, well, that is what I would have said until we started getting into this again. And I think my favorite track is also "Aesthetics of Hate."
Okay, that's fair.
Which is good that we agree on what the best track is. I really, really like Halo as well, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to pick two. That's cheating. So I'll say you get the point, because I do really like it.
Yeah. No, totally.
It's pretty much a tie between that and Aesthetics of Hate.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's a very fair thing. But yeah, Aesthetics of Hate's just an absolute banger. Like, if you're going to write an angry metal song, then goddamn, like, just you've got to get it on at least the same level of Aesthetics of Hate. Otherwise, just don't bother.
That was maybe that's why it's so well revered, because that was the first single off the album.
Yeah, there is a fair point. It is just a very striking song, and again, because it's so heavy and so screamy, it's really surprising that it's so catchy. So yeah,
yeah.
But there you go.
All right. So with that in mind, what are your recommendations?
Right. Okay. Cool. So recommendations. First up, I am going to recommend a Soulfly album, because I love me some Max Cavalera, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. But yeah, Soulfly, bit of a strange career. They start off as a kind of new metal band and get a lot more thrashy and groovy as things go on. So I'm going to pick a late era Soulfly album. I'm going to pick their 8th record, Enslaved, which is very similar in style to The Blackening, in that it's sort of a much more heavy metal, traditionally inspired album, but it's very groovy and obviously a lot more thrashier, and completely screamed as well. A really good record and quite underrated, I think. I think people kind of lost interest in Soulfly, which is a bit.
Yeah, they wouldn't. You wouldn't. I wouldn't pick them out as being particularly. It wouldn't be something I'd normally go for.
Yeah. But honestly, that record is possibly. I think it's probably their best, and like I say, it's their 8th in their discography. So it comes pretty late into their career. But yeah, really good album. And then the other one I'm going to suggest is so this is a UK album. It's a bit of a strange one because it's like almost like a UK underground supergroup. They're a band called This Is Menace, and their first album, No End in Sight, is the one I'm going to recommend. So This Is Menace are made up of members of Pitch Shifter, actually, like Corley.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Pitch Shifter takes me back to Test Drive 5 days.
But every song on the record is sung by a different vocalist, and they're all picked from different bands. So Colin Duran from 100 Reasons features on one of them. I can't remember if Mikey or Justin from Sixth features on one on that album, but they definitely appear on one. They have 2 albums, and I'm trying to remember the vocalists off the top of my head now. It would be better if I had it to hand, wouldn't it? But yeah, it's a very groovy, very thrashy record. It's like it has this lovely scuzzy, crunchy guitar tone that runs all the way through it. It's just really heavy, but there's obviously that sort of catchy, groovy element to it that's very similar to Machine Head as well. So I thought that was why that would be a good pick as well. So there you go.
Cool. That's a couple of interesting choices that I've written down. Okay, so mine are, I've tried to pick things in the same sort of sphere as Machine Head. So my first one is an album by Lamb of God, and the album is Sacrament. Now, interestingly, I didn't know this until we started recording this, but Sacrament was the album up. It was released the same time as The Blackening, and it they lost the Grammy to Machine Head with Aesthetics of Hate.
Wow.
So anybody that knows me will know I'm a really big Lamb of God fan, and their latest album, which is called Storm and Drang, was one of my absolute favourites of last year. If you're new to Lamb of God, you've basically got 2 albums to choose for. There's either Ashes of the Wake, but I've gone for Sacrament, which is groove metal supreme.
Yeah.
Amazing drums throughout, really heavy, moshy, brutal stuff. You got songs like Walk With Me in Hell is a great opener. And you've got like Redneck and Pathetic, Descending. Really, really good album. Really fun. Just something to mosh and bash people about too.
Yeah, definitely.
I saw them live, supporting Megadeth last year.
Oh, cool.
To be honest with you, I went to see Lamb of God. Megadeth were very good too, but I mainly went to see Lamb of God, and they didn't disappoint.
I've definitely seen Lamb of God. I saw them at Download in 2007, the same year as Machine Head as well, actually.
Okay.
So I have seen both bands live. Yeah, very, very good band. I'm pretty keen on Wrath, it's got to be said.
That's interesting.
I really
That's
like
good.
Set to Fail. That album's a lot like thrashier, I think, and I really sort of like that sound.
Oh, there's a song, I think it's called Choke Sermon. Has like one of the best solos in any Lamb of God album. It's very good, and I really like. I pretty much like most of their catalogue. As Palaces Burns really good.
They're pretty solid, it's got to be said. I've got. I think the only thing I owned actually is the Hourglass box set, which is like almost like a best of collection and also some rarities. And yeah, when it gets to like the set to Fail and all the Wrath stuff, I'm just like, oh god, yes, I'm going to wreck everything.
Their only resolution is not quite as good as the others, but it does have a song called Ghost Walking that's exceptional. So it's something to enjoy in any of their albums, really.
Yeah, totally.
That's my first choice. Second one is a groove metal classic, which is Cowboys from Hell by Pantera. Now, Pantera are not a band I would be a massive fan of.
Okay.
Probably because whenever we went to the metal club Opium in Edinburgh, every Sunday they would play Walk, and I got a bit sick of it. But I think Cowboys from Hell is probably their best record, and it's certainly one of the most influential metal albums of the early 90s. You've got the title track, Cemetery Gates, is probably Dimebag Darrell's best solo work.
Yeah.
So I figured since there's a tie into Dimebag there, that would be really good.
Yeah,
choice.
no, I think it's pretty relevant. I think Pantera are definitely quite influential towards Machine Head. Definitely, I think they definitely share a lot of similarities in their style, and I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if every member of Machine Head is a Pantera fan, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah, well, I think they are. I
Yeah.
mean, Cowboys from Hell marks the transition from Pantera into proper groove metal territory, because after that you've got albums like Vulgar Display of Power, Far Beyond Driven, Driven being one that they mention on Aesthetics of Hate, and then you've got the one with a rattlesnake in the box and other stuff. But that's probably a good introduction to Pantera, and Cowboys from Hell should earn its pride of place on your metal playlist. I used to have my running playlist. It was always a good one.
Good stuff.
So, as we no longer reveal what we're going to play next, in case we pick something different, it is our time to say goodbye. So, thank you very much for listening. If you would like to talk to us stalk us or otherwise interact with us, best thing to do is to follow us on Twitter. We're at Cast Iron Show. You can go to our website at castironshow.co.uk. You can also find some of my metal writing at split-screen.net, and you can find Lewis's writing at UK Scum Scene, and I forget the URL for that.
ukscumscene.wordpress.com.
There you go. Thanks.
No worries.
You saved me. Most important thing you can do is to rate and review, or like and subscribe. But yeah, we want you to rate and review it on iTunes, because that's really important for spreading the word of Cast Iron and our message of metal harmony throughout the galaxy. Hopefully in more eloquent words than the lyrics to the song Slanderers. So if you like what we do, share it with your friends. Write us a review on iTunes. That'd be awesome.
Excellent stuff.
Okay, so on that note, we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.